7 o'clock in the morning. Absolutely gorgeous day. Get ready to go do the videotape on the Burbank Ted.
This is take one of the Southeastern Fisheries film on the Burbank Ted. Bob Jones, producer. I'd like to introduce to you today Billy Burbank. This Ted is the brainchild of Billy. He has spent countless hours trying to perfect a Ted that will both eliminate turtles, bycatch, and keep the shrimp from being lost from the nets. Billy?
Yeah, Bob, I don't know, you know, we've been looking at Teds here for quite a while now, and everybody's got their own little idea and aspect, and everybody's been trying to help the fishermen come up with something so that we can continue our industry. And we've had problems with certain Teds all the way down the road. In other words, all of them were unique and did their job, but there was always still one or two things of a Ted that certain fishermen didn't like, and you know, it's hard to please them all with one item. But what we finally looked at here, you know, because I look at these things every day while I'm working and all, and one of the problems with a Georgia jumper type or a grid type Ted is most of them had a center bar across the middle of them and seemed to collect grass and other debris, especially in the Gulf side, and we still had trouble with ours over here during the fat grass seasons, which is early brownie season in summer months. And so I was just trying to figure out a way to design a Ted that didn't have the bar across the middle, but also extruded out the bottom so that any grass or debris that got on there went completely out the bottom of the net. And also I wanted to protrude it a little bit to get the bottom edge of the Ted off of the bottom for dredging and slab rock and what have you. You know, it wouldn't dredge the bottom and shovel mud and stuff up into the bag. Well, this design we came up with a concurve front on it and no bar in the middle, and had the hole in the front cut out a little bit more. We had it to where we're using a bungee cord in it, which can be left out or whatever. It just made the webbing look better to us, to our eye, and you know, we felt like that it wouldn't hinder anything and still let the turtle escape. But what we did was we started putting a few of them out on the boats and having them tested and have the fishermen give us our feedback on them. And so far we've been getting some good feedback. We had some negative stuff, but this was the idea of the Ted, was to put it out and let the fishermen tell us what we needed to do more or what would satisfy them more. And so far, without any flap over it, we've had good results. The Ted is absolutely clean. We had very little or nothing hanging on the Ted. It was all going out the bottom. And so therefore we felt like, well, our shrimp production would be greater, which we had them tested against other Georgia jumpers and soft heads and what have you, and the results were pretty good. I mean, in other words, the shrimp loss was not as great as those Teds, and we had one fisherman in the Louisiana area over there that went into an area where you didn't even have to pull a Ted, and he decided to leave his two in one side just to see how it performed. And he came up level basket to level basket, and the side with the Ted in it was just extremely clean. He didn't have the big starfish and certain jelly and grasses that he was catching, so he was pretty well pleased with that fact. We have a device that we can add to this Ted that we put in the top of the Ted behind the grid, which we call a porthole. Now this little gizmo here has been used in different aspects. Other people have used something similar to this. What we're using it for is to get rid of some fish as far as bycatch is concerned. Now this little device has proved out to be pretty unique. We've had fishermen tell us that with this porthole in there that they feel like they were eliminating, you know, sometimes greater than 65 or 50% of the bycatch. And we had one captain to prove this point to us because he wasn't sure that he might be losing shrimp out of the porthole. They just didn't like an extra hole in their net. So I told him, well, sew a piece of webbing around this porthole and make you a little bag like. So when he did, he made 2 toes, and each time the bag was so full of fish, he couldn't believe it. He found one shrimp, one white shrimp in the bag on those 2 toes, which proved to him. We had another fisherman in the Gulf who was pulling 4 of this particular model right here, 4-inch grid, And he called me on his boat phone and gave me a report, because I wanted a report of what he was doing, because he was in a snapper area. And I asked him and schooled him before he left to pull these TEDs, are you going to an area that you have caught these juvenile snapper? And he said, yes, you know, I catch quite a few of them in my nets in this area that I'm going. And he said, well, I don't know what kind of report I'm going to be able to give you, other than I can just tell you what I was catching in my tri-net and what I was catching in my rigs from years past. So anyway, when he called me back, he told me, he said, Billy, I'm well satisfied. I've had some 10-box tows with these things, and I can't see where I'm losing many shrimp at all. You know, I'm sure I'm losing some, because you do have a hole in the bottom of the net, and some shrimp may go out with the debris itself. But he said, as far as the snapper's concerned, he said, I think that porthole is really doing the job. He said, because I had some tries, and in those tries, I had snapper in those tries, and normally when I catch that kind of snapper in my tri-net, normally my nets can come up blood red with some of these snappers. He said, I had probably 2 or 3 in each net on each side during these tows. He said, the porthole that I was using busted on me. It broke and collapsed. And on that very next tow, the ones that were collapsed caught more snapper. So it just led me to believe that this might be an answer for us for some fish, especially in the snapper species. The fish we were releasing over here were pogies and bluefish and real active croakers or spots that were the active swimmers, the bigger fish. All right. As I was saying, Bob, the porthole just seemed to prove to us that it is eliminating fish, and we would like to try more of them in different places in the nets, and along with other TEDs. I think even with other TEDs, that might prove to work out for us. This is the design we're looking at right here now, which is, like I say, it's got a convex of rounded out front on it, which gave us some strength when we eliminated the bar across the middle. We've got this TED laying over a little bit more because we just feel like that it'll keep itself cleaner and better that way. Plus the fact that we feel like it'll keep the turtle in a laid down position more, and that would help force him out better, because we've seen films on turtles up against regular grids where they get kind of flat backed up against it, and the water pressure holds them up against it. Bob, this will give you a little bit better idea or look at what I was talking about a while ago as far as the curved part of the front. We kind of rounded it almost like a turtle's back. We laid it over a little bit more than the normal slant in most TEDs of this type, because, like I say, we wanted to keep the turtle forced down more in a flattened out state on his belly, so that the water pressure would push him out the TED, instead of like some TEDs that stand up more and being flat, the turtle would tend to get flat backed up against it, and it seemed like it took him longer to escape the trawl. This will give you an idea from the back. Here, this is where our webbing from the back of the TED attaches. So these parts here keep the webbing from the bag back off of the bottom. Now, we've incurred a little bit of mud nut problems, which this is just something that we're steady working on, which we feel like we have an answer for this now, was that in a 4-rig situations in real muddy bottom, it's just like a skier would be 2 skiers behind a boat. When you go into a tight turn, one rig spreads out and you know, maintains its speed while the other rig loses some speed and closes up somewhat. Well, this tends to lay the TED down somewhat, and then this part actually sunk into the mud, so it dredged a little mud. Well, what we've come up with is we've got a piece of material, which is a rubberized material, very tough, that we're going to use even instead of the bungee cord, which we have in this rig here now, which we just put in there because we like it, because it held the webbing in the right spot, gave it some strength around the edge. There's some controversy going on about it. It's no problem with us to eliminate it, because some fishermen want us to put a flap on here, a webbing flap, which covers the hole nicely, but still lets the TED perform like it should, keeps it clean. This flap we're going to call the mud flap, which will attach to a ring type system across the bottom of the TED here, which will lay and flap up against the grid, will actually extend down to the edge, but not all the way, so as if this TED did ride on the bottom for some reason with not enough flotation or what have you, that it wouldn't keep the door closed. We've seen some films on this, on some flaps, that extrude beyond and below the TED, which without the proper flotation on it would actually keep the TED closed and any turtles in there could not escape until they got ready to retrieve their nets. Then the turtle would go out. So we're trying to eliminate that. But anyway, this mud flap would go across here and extrude down here. It would give the grid itself some protection and also keep it from mudding up to this point right here. It would actually just slide or skid across the bottom. All right. Let me turn the same bottom and show you the bottom, the whole aspect of it right here now. We feel like we have a fairly large hole here, which, you know, will let most any turtle out of the trawl. One thing we found out, we've got some captains who are pulling it just like you see it here now, with no flap over the hole, nothing. Over here on our hard bottom, no mudding up problems and nothing. And they can't see the difference in a net with any other kind of Ted, to where this is losing more shrimp than what the other Teds are. In fact, they're claiming they're catching more shrimp with this particular Ted. We have had some results of down the beach areas and all, and at night that fishermen feel like they've lost some shrimp. But we came up with a water flow deal that came underneath the net and pushed into the trawl here as well as up here. Now this is what we feel one thing is keeping our shrimp moving. Now there's going to be times you're going to have a lot of debris that some shrimp with the debris go out. Well, you know, this is something you just can't help unless we go to using a flap type system, piece of webbing. We've got some captains that just swear by that. They love it that way. But we still have some using it without it. But we also feel like in clear water and daylight situations, we're eliminating some of the spots and croakers and other fish that actually swim back out of the trawl this way. So what we did too is, I mentioned a while ago, was about the portholes. Just a little simple design here. It looks like a football with some angles coming off the back for bracing. And what we did with this is we came so many meshes from the back of the grid itself here, that's Ted, and we put a slit in the top of the net here, and we bring the back part up and sew it up here across the top of the porthole, and in the bottom edge, the front edge right here, as it sews across the bottom edge. Now what this does is it creates a hole from back here that any fish, shrimp, what have you, that you don't want to lose coming from this angle do not see this hole. But the fish that are real hard swimmers who swim in and out and back here, and if you've looked at other films, you'll see fish all up and down inside of a Ted swimming around. Well, this is where they're going out this hole. This is the part I was telling you about that the fisherman sewed a circular piece of webbing on here, just like a little bag, and he said there were 2 drags each time. It was just chocolate block full of pogies and other fish, and he had 1 shrimp in it. So, you know, to us that was a good test. Now for these snapper and other type fish, I want to see these portholes tested and use, you know, maybe on the quarter panels on the sides, maybe even a little larger design of this across the top. Maybe even use more so in the front too, because we also see fish that swim in front of the Ted that actually never get the chance to pass through the grid. Nighttime in murky water or muddy water situations, we've had less fish report of escaping, and we just feel like that they can't see the hole or what have you. Some still escape, but we just don't lose the majority of the fish that we do in the daylight hours or clean dragging. So this is something we need to work on too, where maybe with a lighted stick or something in the area to show these fish their escape. We also are working on some other ideas along with all of this, as far as fish with some larger webbing panels with funnels, what have you. We're looking to eliminate some fish, and we feel like we've got enough ideas that if we get the help from the fishermen and other people, that we might be able to come up with something really great there. We're excited about this Ted. We've got most of the fishermen that are pulling them are real happy with them. In fact, they're not pulling anything but this right now. We have had, I would say you can count them on one hand, versus 40 Teds or more that are being used that have had a complaint and haven't given it really another chance. I just feel like that they, you know, they gave it one test and that was it. And they just haven't seen all that this Ted can do. There's many things that we can do. Flotation, we've got some using 1 float, some using 2 floats, some using 3 floats. I think it's just adaptable to each person's situation, the depth of water that he's fishing in, the rolling or twisting of these things. We found that some captains have, after talking with me now, have found out that, well, they had their bridles wrong. Most of them have gone to a yoke bridle system, and they've had these too short to where the 2 nets couldn't separate in the back end, and this caused one to lay over and caused a rolling action. lazy lines not being long enough. The captains now are starting to come up with their own little techniques to set these rigs, and most of them are coming up really well. In other words, they're getting them out with no twist, coming up with no twist, so they're pretty much satisfied with that idea. We offer this in a 4-inch grid, which most people in the Gulf like the little wider spacings over there, which is 4-inch centered, and we also offer a 3-inch centered grid for this coast because we have jelly balls, and you know, this helps eliminate them. The 4-inch doesn't seem to work on some of the smaller jelly balls we have in certain seasons. We also offer, with the 4-inch grid, we have a pop-in device, which is just another device that just pops in right behind this one that fills in the gaps. Now, this offers less than a 3-inch spacing in there. Now, whether this part will be approved or not, we don't know. We haven't really tested this, so this is something we're looking at that we feel like would benefit a guy pulling a 4-inch Ted. Came to an area where he had jelly balls because it will still let the shrimp through, still keeps it grassless. The only thing that I can see is it might eliminate a little bit more of the food fish which the fishermen would like to catch, such as flounder and white. So other than that, Bob, this is just what we have, what we've come up with, and we've been a little bit slow putting it out because we just wanted to make sure we had all the answers in here before we let it go. Okay, Bob, I want to explain one thing for the viewers or some of the people. This ring in the front and the aft here is just a rigging tool here. We just put it in here so that the net stretches just like it's in the water. The webbing on this Ted is 1 5/8 number 36 webbing on these, and we use 1 5/8 number 24 on the 3-inch grids. It's 150 meshes around, which the tails of most nets now that we're seeing, most net makers now are making their tails of approximately 150 meshes around to accept most of these Teds. This is the way most of them are built, with 150 meshes of webbing. There's nothing saying that it can't be rigged with 120 meshes of webbing or whatever. It's just that this has worked out and this has been the standard. A fisherman, all he would have to do as far as sewing it on the tail of his nets is sew it mesh for mesh if he's got 150 meshes around the tail, or if he happened to have 120 meshes around the tail, he can sew it 3 singles and a double, you know, just for the amount of take-ups. There's no real big problem in that. The length of the Ted, we've got 60 meshes. One reason we've got that is it doesn't waste webbing. The webbing comes 120 meshes deep, so we just use half and half. The Ted can be altered, shortened in the front or the aft to suit a certain captain. It also, he can eliminate some of the tail on his net if he's got too much straight on his net and he doesn't want to increase the length of his net by adding this in plus what he already had. So he can shorten his net. And so far, we haven't found any problem with this Ted in any trawl, like some other Teds have said, you know, the net had to have a certain amount of tail and this, that, and the other. We found that this has worked on just about every kind of trawl we put it on, no matter whether it had a long tail or a short tail. So these are some other answers that the fishermen themselves can give us after enough of them are pulling them. All right, Bob, this is looking at from the bag or the cod end, looking into the Ted. This is where your shrimp breeze would normally come, is through this area here. Again, this is just a rigging tool here. This is just a grid we have here to help spread the Ted out so we can rig it. This gives you a look at the actual hole and where the water pressure from below actually comes into the Ted itself. Now this is how we feel like I say, we get the push of the shrimp on through this Ted because we have water pressure that comes up underneath this Ted and in here as well as up here, so we keep a steady flow. And on clean bottom and daylight drag and what have you, we know for a fact we're all losing some fish out of here. We got our fish swimming out of here, the strong swimmers. Most of the fishermen are explaining that all they're seeing is just some little small bullhead type fish, some little flat fish, stuff that can't swim, but it's so minimal they can pick them up with their hands, you know. I don't know what else to say to you about this part right here, other than the fact that the mud flap that we are talking about offering will give this a little bit of protection here. We have noticed some shine pattern that it shines really right across the tips here, so that tells us that the Ted's staying in position while it's being towed. The weight of these Teds are ranging anywhere from about 18 to 21 or 22 pounds, and that's with the webbing and floats and all, so I think we kept our weight down fairly well. We offer a light 5/16 version that a lot of the smaller boats or some of the boats that doesn't have the power like that particular version. And we have our 3/8 grid all the way, which is 4 and 3 inch, which is a little bit more heavy duty for the big 4-rig boats, the boats with power and all. These TEDs can come with floats, with portholes, with mud flaps, with a flap, with or without a bungee until something is brought up about that. So there's many ways that you can get this TED, or you can get it just what we call a plain Jane, just a TED in the webbing. We're just looking real optimistically about this TED, and just hope that the fishermen will come on and work with us on this and give us some feedback, and let's keep this ball rolling so that we all can survive this industry, because we all want to